In this episode, I chat with Hope Gramley about being named Rookie of the Year, her relationship with Shannon O'Keefe, bowling in socks, and more. I'm Tim Young, and this is A Bowler's Mind. Hey, Hope, welcome to the show, and thank you for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So first, congratulations on being named the 2023 PWBA Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, thank you.
So let's start with giving us a recap on your 2023 season. What was your perspective?
Sure. So this was my first full-time season, the first time I got my card, so it was all very exciting for me. I had done a couple of stops, mostly just the majors or the tournaments that were closest to my home, so Tour Champs last year. And I had performed well in those. And so I went into this season really confident, but it was also very exciting and a whole new world now that I was officially a pro. So Stockton was the first one, and that was my first professional cash ever. So that
Very
was
cool.
super fun. Yep, I finished 14th at that one, which, for the goals that I had set, I had two goals. One was cash every event and then win a title.
And you cashed, I think if I looked right, you cashed in 8 out of 11 events.
Yes. Yep.
Which is
So
still pretty
close.
amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty close. Every stop I cashed, and so
Okay.
I consider that a win.
Right.
But yeah, so you started off with Stockton in the 14th place, which was a really good start. I had qualified like 6th, I think, going into the cashers round, and then dropped a little bit, but I still cashed, so I was happy.
Mhm.
And then I followed up that week with Spokane, which I made the stepladder for that one. I finished 4th in Spokane, which was very, very cool just to be back in that kind of scenario. And then from then I just carried that momentum of, performing well and bowling well, and then just kind of kept going. And I made a few more shows. Grand Rapids was really big for me. I made back-to-back shows there. But yeah, as long as I'm putting myself in that position where I can be on the step ladder, then that's a win in my book.
Was Rookie of the Year ever something you considered at the beginning of the season?
It was something that obviously had been talked about. A lot of fans were anticipating my rookie campaign and, the race to Rookie of the Year. But I didn't really think about it much during the tour.
Right.
Just because, it wasn't really a goal to win Rookie of the Year. So I didn't try to think about it at tournaments. I just took it, one shot at a time, one tournament at a time. And then I knew that if I were to accomplish that, then that would put me in a good spot for Rookie of the Year. So,
was there a point during the tour when it kind of hit you that Rookie of the Year was a reality?
There was, I think it was right after Grand Rapids, because I had made those back-to-back shows, so I got a lot of points just from that stop in general. And so I knew that, that was a good feat to have accomplished, to be able to put myself in the position to win Rookie of the Year.
Okay.
And so I just focused the rest of the season on performing well and trying to get that last goal of mine, the title.
What did you learn through your first official season on tour? What's the biggest thing you learned, I guess you could say?
Right. Well, I always expected that tour was going to be difficult, right? You're going against the best female bowlers in the world. And so I knew kind of what that environment was like, also thanks to the few stops that I did in previous years.
Okay.
But I didn't really understand that all of these ladies are friends. Like they're all really good friends. And so it took Tour Champs this year for me to really see it. But even if someone is bowling bad, they always want their best friends, their friends, all the ladies on tour to bowl their best. Because we're all going after the same dreams. And so why not support someone who has a similar dream? So I saw that really well in Tour Champs. And that was something that, I knew some of the ladies were friends, but I didn't really understand the extent of their support to each other until Tour Champs.
What advice would you give someone who's coming in behind you now, who is starting their first PWBA tour? What advice you give them?
Well, I would tell them that it is definitely intimidating, especially when you're going up against, we'll use Jordan Richard, for example. She was having a fantastic year, but just because she's doing her thing doesn't mean you can't do yours. You can still have a very successful season without winning a title. So try not to be intimidated. everybody's bowling the same game that you are. The lane is still 60 feet. There's still 10
Right.
pins. Everything's the same. So just go out there and do your best. Don't give up.
How did you deal with that uh, that intimidation factor?
It helped that I had Shannon as my collegiate coach, so
Mm,
I had been spending a lot of time around arguably one of the best in the world, or the best,
right.
right? So as far as the intimidation factor goes for who they are and what they mean for the sport of bowling, I thought I was doing okay at handling that.
Mm,
I had, I grew up doing programs, and so I got to
mm,
see these ladies and meet them when I was really little.
okay.
And so just to finally be out there with them rather than behind them was really cool.
Was that sort
So
of a surreal moment when you finally realized that you were out there with them?
absolutely, absolutely. During the Stockton stop is the one that I remember most because it was the first that I felt a part of that group rather
Mm-hmm.
than, a little fan that was following them around. So Stockton was really cool. Between shots, instead of like really thinking about what I was doing, I just stood there and watched. I
Mm,
watched all of these fantastic bowlers around me, and I was watching what they were doing and their reactions. And I enjoy watching bowling
mm-hmm.
outside of doing it myself. And so that's what I do between frames to just kind of really take in the moment. And I got to see and really live. And I'm a pro now, and
Right.
this is where I belong. So,
I noticed you joined Bowl TV some when you weren't bowling during the tour
mhm.
on their live stream. Is that something you'd like to do more in the future? Obviously, you'd rather be
I,
bowling,
I,
but as
right.
far as the broadcast side, is that something you enjoy?
Yeah, of course, if I'd rather be bowling, but if the opportunity arises, I would love to talk on Bowl TV more. Emil and everybody
Mm,
behind the scenes that runs Bowl TV, they're such amazing people.
hmm.
And I have built up quite a big fan group with the Bowl TV chat, just because I like chatting with people. So to do more, I would love to if the opportunity comes. Um, but we'll have to cross that bridge when we get there. Hopefully, I'm bowling.
Right, right, yeah. Were there any adversities you had to overcome this past tour that maybe the average fan isn't aware of? Just some internal things or physical things you had to deal with?
Um, Not so much. Oh, I mean, physical was a little bit difficult. If I started to somehow develop a bad habit during a stop, I didn't really have a whole lot of practice in between stops
Mm,
to really focus and figure that out. And so I would go into the next stop just aware of what was happening, and then I'd play mind games with myself. I'm like,
mm,
okay, so this is what you're doing. If I'm missing every ball, two boards left at the arrows, I'm just gonna move my eyes two boards right, and then we'll figure out why later.
mm,
Um, so I mean, there was small things like that. Nothing dramatic happened with my game while we were
right.
on tour. As far as other physical um, issues or challenges go, the traveling was very hard
Mm,
on your body. I drove to most of the stops,
okay.
so just sitting in the car for that long and then
Right.
going and having to bowl 12 games in a day, it can be exhausting. Your legs get tired, your back is stiff, that kind
Mm,
of thing. But as long as you just stretch, and I made sure I was warmed up before we actually got going,
okay.
then I usually turned out okay.
What are your goals for the 2024 season?
Cash every event,
Mm,
win a title.
there you go.
I'm keeping my goals the same. I feel like if I really keep my goals to not necessarily a minimum, but something that's a little bit more realistic and doesn't put pressure on me, then I think it's easier for me to really focus on the bowling while I'm doing it rather than the outcome or the end goal.
Sure. I'm sure you get asked this question a lot, but could you share your bowling love story, your origin story of how you first got into bowling, and
Yeah,
then
yeah,
kind of what led up into college?
right. So we have you heard of the Kids Bowl free thing?
Uh, I think I'm not as
It's
familiar
like
with that. Would you explain more about
yeah,
that?
it's an advertisement for over the summer. Usually there's these coupons on every front desk of every bowling center. It says
Okay.
Kids Bowl free, and basically, you'd pick up a coupon, and if you're a kid under a certain age, I don't remember the age, then you got two free games of bowling each day.
Okay.
And so back in 2010,
Mm,
my family and I started to pick that up.
okay.
My dad had this old bowling ball that he had from his dad, I think, and so we just started going bowling with house balls and having a really good time at doing that. Uh, right around my birthday is when I got my first ball, just a pink plastic ball with hearts
Yeah.
all over. And so when I got my first ball, it was a really big moment for me just because even though it was plastic, I felt like it was mine and
Hmm.
that I could get better with this. And so the more we went, the worse I hated being bad about it. So I worked really hard, and my dad and we learned the sport of bowling together.
Okay.
And so as I got better, he got better as well.
Hmm.
And so we just kind of grew up in that little coach and kid duo thing.
Nice.
But eventually I got my first reactive ball, which was an Anarchy, one of my favorite balls ever. And I just kept getting better, and I never really stopped.
So did you
Yeah.
ever, during those early years, you never really had any formal training?
Not really. We had a couple family friends who had more experience in the bowling world, and they
Okay.
knew more about the sport of bowling. We learned from them just from doing, the youth adult leagues and stuff every week that we saw them. And then I had a couple lessons. I had one lesson with Rod Ross at the ITRC,
Okay.
and then I think one with Kim Terrell Kearney. But right around that time is when she got her job at North Carolina, so that ended
Okay.
pretty quickly. But other than those two, it was pretty much just me and my dad.
Did you play any other sports growing up?
Oh, pretty much every sport you could think of. Yeah. I started out with gymnastics.
Okay.
When I was little, I did gymnastics, and then by the time I was 5 years old, I was already close to 5 foot tall, and so they were like, maybe you should find another sport.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gymnastics ended. I played a season of baseball with my brother. Um, then basketball was a big one. My dad was a basketball star in college,
Okay.
so it was easy for us to play basketball together. So I played basketball for I think it was like 7 or 8 years.
Okay.
And when I got to middle school is when I took over volleyball,
Okay.
and I played volleyball up until 3 years of college. So,
Which basketball and volleyball, both height, both are
yes,
positives in that
yeah,
sports.
absolutely.
So what made you deviate then into obviously you're gifted with height wise. I mean, you could have gone basketball, could have continued with volleyball. What made you
Mhm.
decide to focus more on bowling?
Well, I ended up stopping basketball because I just liked the sport of volleyball better.
Hmm.
And by the time college came around, an unfortunate incident happened with my assistant volleyball coach that ended with some poor words
Hmm.
on his choice, and so I made the decision to leave. It was a bad scenario,
Hmm.
but leaving volleyball was not so much as my choice as more of
Hmm.
a way to protect myself, I guess.
Gotcha.
I didn't need that kind of coaching,
Right. I understand.
so I made that decision. So I stopped playing, and I just went bowling full time, which I'm actually very thankful of it. Like as much as it hurt when I quit volleyball at the time. Later that year, we won the NCAA championships,
Oh
so
wow.
I can't be too upset.
During those college years, was that when Shannon O'Keefe was your coach during that time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So I had 5 years at McKendree, and she and Brian both were my coaches for all 5 years.
Tell me a little bit more about your college experience on the bowling side.
On the bowling side, yeah. Well, we had, the O'Keefes have built McKendree bowling into such a powerhouse.
Hmm.
So there was always that expectation of, doing well at college tournaments. Early in my campaign at McKendree, so my freshman sophomore year, Bree Clemmer was our anchor, and we had Taylor Bailey and Lauren Pate on my team as
Hmm.
well. So I had a very stacked team from the beginning.
Okay.
Um, and so I really didn't learn how to bowl under pressure or with any kind of fire, I guess.
Hmm.
Well, I had fire, of course. I had my girls hyping me up
Right.
and everything. But I guess I never really learned how to bowl under such intense pressure until my junior year.
Okay.
That was when I became the anchor of the team. And so to
Hmm.
be put in the position where I would have to strike or double or get all three in the 10th frame
Right.
for us to win the match, I had never experienced that before
Hmm.
myself.
Okay.
My team had, but it was always, Bree Clemmer. So she had to face that, and then it was my turn. So I had to learn how to bowl under pressure pretty quick. But I had all of Shannon's experience, I had all of Brian's experience, and I even, I relied on Lauren and Bree and Taylor as well, even after they had graduated, and you know, tried to put myself in their shoes and get their intake
Hmm.
on situations like that to see how I could be better for my team.
What would you say the biggest thing is you learned from Shannon?
I would say the biggest thing that I learned from them was just how to be a bowler.
Hmm.
Before I got to college, I was just athletic, so I went through the motions and ended up being pretty good at it.
Hmm.
But I actually learned a lot of the sport of bowling, lane play, different bowling balls, the surfaces, all that kind of thing. I learned that from Brian and Shannon. And without that knowledge, I wouldn't have been as successful as I was on tour this year. So
So would you say that your bowling career on just your own personal level really took off when you got to college?
I would say so, yes.
Okay. But you're
Yep.
obviously good enough to go to college and bowl collegiately.
Or- Right.
But
Yeah.
leading
I'm
up to
not
that, you were
saying,
just bowling in youth leagues and youth tournaments and that
yeah.
sort of thing.
Yep. Junior gold was the biggest one. So I wanted to bowl in the sport patterns, and so I also wanted to bowl with the big kids.
Okay.
So ever since I can remember when I started doing youth tournaments, they were always different divisions based off age.
Gotcha.
I didn't like that. So when I was 13, if I was in the 15 and under group, technically I'd ask if I could bowl with the high school kids because I
Okay.
didn't want to be down there.
Okay.
Um, so I just trying to keep getting better by watching and learning from people. Of course, we never really know had I probably could have made it to tour without going to college, but
Mm.
I knew that I was going to learn so much
Mm-hmm.
and at least get the experience of, bright lights, for example, like TV shows in college. So I'm grateful and thankful that I went to college and learned a lot.
What made you choose to go to McKendree?
Well, Brian and Shannon, really. But then I also had that was the only school that I was looking into that gave me the option to play both volleyball and bowling.
Okay.
So I picked there.
Were you able to get a
Yeah.
scholarship with either of those sports?
For both of them,
Okay.
yes. Yeah.
Nice.
So originally I was a walk-on for the volleyball team.
Okay.
And then after my freshman season, I got freshman of the year and second team all conference. And
Nice.
so then my coach picked up the rest of my tab. So
Very cool.
yeah.
All right. So can you share a funny Shannon O'Keefe story, funny interaction with you and her during your
Oh
college years?
man. Oh, we had so many. Shannon and I together are like two peas in a pod. We were just sitting there laughing the whole time. There were multiple times where, I usually stand in the front when we're on the right lane. I would stand in the front, and that's pretty close to where Shannon stays.
Okay.
And we would be so not focused about the bowling at all. And Brian would be standing in the back, and he goes, "Girls, like let's focus. Like we're working right now.
Right.
We need to focus here." But Shannon and I, and even some of the other girls as well, we would just be cracking jokes and laughing our butts off at the front and not even thinking about the bowling. So there's so many. I'm trying to think of a really good one. So, all right, so we'll do this. So my junior year, um, as a team, we had created like a little bit of a secret language with
Okay.
each other. So, if Shannon wanted to tell us to make a move or a ball change or something, she would tell us in code
Okay.
so that other teams wouldn't hear what we were doing.
Okay.
Not that they were, but we
Right.
thought they were.
Right.
So we came up with all of these different lingos. So, a one and one left, which is a really common move in college, we called it Mazel Tov.
Okay.
So if Shannon would be like, "Hey, Hope, Mazel Tov here," and I'd be like, "Oh yeah, yeah, okay." And so I'd make a one and one and not tell anybody. But we had little code names for all of that. A ball change was Pasquale Fiducia,
Wow.
who actually was a volleyball player at McKendree,
Okay.
before my time, that he was on the men's team. And so we would just come up with these different names and meanings, and we just knew as a team that that was what we were doing. So that was a fun though. We always giggled whenever we actually used them.
Who came up with most of the names?
Uh, I mean, it was a good group effort.
Okay.
Even Brian pitched in with a couple of them, like the Pasquale Fiducia, the ball change one. That was his idea.
Okay.
But then we had, mac and cheese and lasagna and elevator, which meant nothing. We would just scream out elevator
Just to
to throw
confuse the
people
other
off.
team.
Yeah. So it was a lot of them. So I actually don't think I'm sure I partook in the
Hmm.
creating of the games, but I don't remember if any of them actually stuck. But the person I can remember is Rebecca Hagerman, who is on adult team now.
Okay.
She made a lot of code words.
So, how often do you practice, and when you do, how do you like to structure a practice? Or
Well,
or
right
or
now
are you
I'm
less structured? Do you like to kind of free
right.
flow?
Well, right now, so I'm not practicing as much as I'd like, but I am traveling. I'm still bowling, so
Mm,
I'm getting the competitive practice as far as tournaments go. Whenever I do get a chance to sit down and really focus on like a practice, I'm always structured.
okay.
I always have something that I'm working on or something that I'm focusing on at least, even if it's just getting reps of doing one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'll go out and I'll practice for 2 hours before my heart's happy and I decide that I need lunch and then go home. Um, but it's hard for me to go and practice and only do it for 20, 30 minutes because
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's not as productive as just being there longer and really drilling into my
Mm,
routine, whatever it is that I'm working on. um, so I'll every day would be ideal. Unfortunately, I don't have the luxury of being able to go bowl and practice for 2 hours every day, but at least I would say 3 times a week
okay.
at least. So 3 or 4 times a week I'll go and I'll just hunker down on my little lane and bowl for 2 hours.
Yeah.
Yep.
Interesting that you mentioned wanting to practice for 2 hours and not just doing a short
Hmm.
practice. Because I've also
Yeah.
often wondered, even for myself, if bowling for 2 hours, if bad habits can start to creep in because if you're doing the same thing over and over and over for a long period of time, you obviously towards the end of that 2 hours you're less fresh than you were at the beginning.
Right. Yeah.
Um, as compared to if you did an hour practice or 30-minute practice and just worked on one thing, is I've always wondered if that's better. But so 2 hours works good for you.
Yeah. It definitely depends on the person. I like my boyfriend. He can go out and practice for 20, 30 minutes and be just fine.
Okay.
Of course, he's still also working on things, but it's more of a like a physical checkup than it
Hmm.
is really working on something.
Okay.
But even if I'm just checking in and making sure that I know how to throw the ball down the lane,
Right.
then I'll probably still bowl for at least an hour, probably an hour and a half, just getting reps, and I'll still focus on something. So like recently, I used to look at the foul line when I would let the ball go,
Okay.
which is not something that a lot of people do, but it's easy to do.
Okay.
And so it wasn't until after the tour season that I had really sat down and trained my eyes to look at the arrows
Okay.
like everybody else. I felt like I would be more consistent. My shot repeatability would be better. And so I really drilled myself on doing that. And it started with just doing foul line release drills, but I would do it looking up at the arrows.
Hmm.
So I started over. I went down to the basics. I did foul line release drills for 3 days, and then I went to one steps for 3 days, and
Hmm.
and then after that, it just got to be getting reps, doing a full approach, but looking at the arrow. Like I didn't care where the ball went or what the score was.
Hmm.
I would just get reps. And so even if I were bowling for only an hour, hour and a half, then that was pretty much what I was focusing on, getting my eyes to be comfortable staying at the arrows rather than dropping them.
So you were doing foul line drills for just an hour and a half or 2 hours, just over
Yeah.
and over and over, so nothing else.
I didn't even put shoes on. I would
Okay.
just bowl. I'd walk up to the foul
Well,
line in
I
my
saw on your
socks or my
Instagram there's a
sandals.
shot of you in
Yeah.
socks out there bowling, and I did.
Yep. Yep, that's what I was working on. I would just I think not putting on shoes helped me not take a full approach
Hmm.
because of course when you're bowling you always want to bowl and you want
Right.
to bowl for real. So it's easy to, back out of what your intentional, your
Hmm.
purpose is for that practice and then just go bowl full shots. Um, but this was something that we did at McKendree a couple times. We just wouldn't put shoes on
Hmm.
and we would
Interesting.
just go up to the foul line and do release drills all day.
You've bowled on some big stages, national
Hmm.
stages, USBC Queens in 2022 on national television. How
Yeah.
do you deal with the nerves of being, under the hot lights and having a focused crowd just watching you bowl?
Yeah. Well, it's even with the, Bowl TV step ladders, that's still same intimate environment with the
Hmm.
fans right there. And then you're the only one bowling, so it's super quiet. Um, of course, you're a little bit nervous, but yeah, and I'm still trying to figure out exactly how to be successful in those scenarios because I haven't won a whole lot of the games on those step ladders. But I just try to remind myself each shot that it's still 60 feet. the pattern is the same that I bowled on all week.
Mm-hmm.
There's still 10 pins, and I'm bowling on the same pair as my opponent. Everything here is fair, and it's the same. Nothing changes. So whenever I get in those scenarios, I just try to remind myself and really stick to my pre-shot routine and just try to calm my body and make sure that everything is as relaxed as it could be.
This concludes part 1 of my conversation with Hope. Stay tuned for part 2, but in the meantime, share this episode with a friend and don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you next time on The Bowler's Mind.